31, Chapter 31, American Idol. My wife was pregnant and just weeks away from giving birth. We were still in our honeymoon phase. We had been living with her parents for a year, trying to decide where we would put down roots. Staying with her parents was ideal for us because we had a chance to save up a little bit of money. I was working as a family counselor at Phoenix Group, a group home for kids. At all of the jobs that I have ever worked, I never went in giving out my bio or rattling off a list of things that I had done in my life, but they would eventually find out. Maybe it was because I was always singing. The young people that I worked with had all experienced hard lives. It brought joy to my heart to be a part of a staff that was working to steer those young adults in the right direction. The same year that I worked for the Phoenix Group, I went to San Francisco to audition for American Idol, Season 4. I was contestant number 92346. I slept outside for 2 nights with about 3,000 other aspiring singers. It was another great experience to be out there sleeping on the ground and listening to all kinds of voices singing in line. Though I had been signed to Death Row, my album was never released. I had not yet seen the success I had dreamed of. I was hungry, so I waited with the other hopefuls. We were equals as far as I was concerned. The next morning, American Idol opened the doors to the arena. People were passing out food, water, toothpaste, and juice to each other. It was such an inspiration to see singers going in for what they believed in. We had all slept on the ground and in the rain for a chance to pass the first set of judges. We wanted to make it to see Simon Cowell, Paula Abdul, and Randy Jackson. After making it inside, I auditioned for 2 judges and advanced to the next round, where I sang 2 songs for the show's producer, Nigel Lithgow. Once I made it past him, I was on to Simon, Paula, and Randy. When I walked in the room, I was so scared because I saw that Brandy was one of the guest judges. I didn't want her to blow my cover. When I walked in the room, she started jumping up and down. "I know him! That's Danny Boy," she said. After that audition, Idol called me and said that I could not be on the show because I had a record deal. But that wasn't the case. I was no longer signed to Death Row and my album was never released. I did whatever I could to downplay the whole Death Row thing. By some miracle, my plan worked, and they agreed to let me compete. At work, the staff and clients hung banners in support of me. Idol checked the contestants into a hotel. At this juncture, we no longer had to sleep outside. During this time, I had the chance to meet a lot of good singers and people from all over the world. When it was time to be put in groups, I was paired with 2 other guys. Scott Salvo was from Ohio and Matthew Myers was from Georgia. After the first day, I knew that our team was at risk because Scott had an attitude with Matthew and me. It was like he thought that he was too good to sing with us. When we were scheduled for rehearsal, Scott would show up late. Not only did we have to learn the songs, we had to come up with a routine, and none of us knew how to dance. Both of my group mates were talented singers, and our voices melded together beautifully. If they were judging solely based on our vocal ability, we would have nothing to worry about. The next day, they had us sitting in the arena for a long time before they even began filming. We sat there and waited nervously until it was our time to perform. When we got on the stage, Matthew forgot some of his verse. That made me nervous as hell. When I came out to do my part, I didn't feel that I did as well as I wanted. Scott sang the last verse, and we ended the song with a hard harmony. After performing, Randy and Paula said that it was the best harmonic ending that they had ever heard on the show. At the end of it, I was really happy with what we had done. After all of the performances were complete, all of the contestants that performed were told if they had made it to the next round. From our group, Scott and I had made it through, but Matthew was cut. I felt really bad for Matthew because he was really cool. Things progressed fast after the cut. It seemed as though they were trying to put a lot more pressure on the artists that were left. I hung in there. With each performance, the judges would give me a great compliment. Things were going well until Idol's lawyer came to me with copies of the Death Row website. I was all over the site, along with promotional copy about my album release. The lawyer walked up to me and was like, "What the fuck is this?" And he walked away. By this time, they placed different groups in different rooms. I didn't think anything of it because all of the people that were in the room that I was in could sing their asses off. After sitting in the room for a while, the judges came in and announced that our group would be going home. I was at a loss for words. I felt that I had missed out on another opportunity to share with the world. Death Row had me at a standstill once again, but life and music go on. I'm not a hater or anything, but how the hell did Scott make it so far? Chapter 32, Where do we go from here? Ari and I took a trip to Chicago so that she could have a chance to meet the family and friends that were unable to make it to LA for our wedding. We were also on the hunt for a family home, so we scheduled an appointment with a realtor so that we could explore the Chicago market. We saw some nice houses, but after braving the bitter cold, we decided to take our home search elsewhere. When the holidays were over, we were on our way back to sunny LA. Ari had a friend who had been going back and forth between Atlanta and California. She had finally found a property that she wanted, and her house was being built. She had hyped it up, so we decided to have a look for ourselves. When we arrived in Atlanta, we met up with the same agent that helped Ari's friend find her place. By the time we headed back to California, our house was being built. In no time, we We were shopping for furniture and moving into our house. The house had a huge kitchen and living room. The master suite was the size of a one-bedroom apartment. Atlanta was a good move for us. We both had great jobs, and I had partnered with her father to open a picture and home decor store. Business was good with so many people relocating to Georgia. We lived in Atlanta for a few years without family. That was really hard on us. My stepson, David, was missing his grandparents. Demarion was a baby when we moved to Atlanta, and so he hadn't really had a chance to know them. When the economy failed, everything went crazy. Ari was laid off, and my job wasn't paying enough to keep us afloat. Business slowed, so we had no choice but to close our store. Just about every other month, Ari's dad had to help us out financially. With the cost of living in California becoming more expensive, her parents decided to relocate to Atlanta. This way, they would be closer to the children, and together we would be able to make things work financially. Many people had told me that it was a bad idea, but I had lived with Ari's family before. I didn't think we'd have a problem. 33. Chapter 33. Trouble in Paradise. The first sign of trouble came before Ari's parents had even made it to Georgia. Her father was demanding the master bedroom. He told her that he would not come unless we gave it to him. I told her to tell him to stay in California if that was the case. I wasn't letting anybody move into that room. By this time, I should have seen what everyone was talking about, but I guess I had to find out for myself. Ari and I were already having problems. We were barely getting along because we were having serious financial problems. People tend to forget about the good times when finances go awry. To make matters worse, my back problems had returned. I could barely walk. The pain made it hard for me to find consistent work. When my in-laws arrived, I did everything I could to make sure they were comfortable. I treated them the same way I would have treated my own parents if they were there, but their timing couldn't have been worse. Ari and I were really going through. We weren't kissing and there was no sex. We were barely communicating. Usually, we would talk several times a day. Even my stepson stopped communicating with me as he normally did. Things were falling apart, but we were trying to work them out. Within 4 months, things had changed drastically. I was feeling like I was living with a family that I was not a part of. My wife had started going out with her friends all the time, and I was going in and out of town, sometimes out of the country, chasing after this music thing. Our marriage was holding on by a string. The tension in the house was thick. When I left for my gigs in Amsterdam, my father-in-law was working on a model train set. It was the size of a twin bed. That train set took up over half of the guest room, but that wasn't as bad as the Blockbuster movie store he had set up in the same room. He had installed shelves and organized his movies in alphabetical order. There were at least 3,000 VHS tapes in his collection. As crazy as it was, I offered a compromise. I told my wife that he could have the recording booth that I had built in the garage to store his tapes, but he complained that the climate would damage his collection. When I returned from my gig in Amsterdam, I was looking for my cat. His name was Studio. When I couldn't find Studio, I started looking for his litter pan. When my son came home from school, I asked him where the cat was. He said, "Grandpa gave it to the lady." I called Ari, cursing like a motherfucker. When we talked, she said, "I didn't want the cat anyway. My father-in-law had taken over my house, and I had let it happen." I couldn't say anything to Ari because her father could do nothing wrong in her eyes. He knew what he was doing, because the more she and I fell out, the more silent he became with me. I felt like he was trying to be her husband and her father. He was trying to do everything I was doing. When I talked to her mother about our problems, she would say, "It will be okay." After a while, that changed into, "Maybe you all should separate if that's what she wants." Ari had been telling me that she didn't want to be married anymore. She said that I didn't have enough to offer. She felt that I was taking from my other children. She needed more. She wanted me to leave our family home, but I didn't want that. I tried marriage counseling, but by that point, it didn't matter to Ari what anybody had to say when it came to making the marriage work. I had nowhere to go. I packed my truck as much as I could, but the majority of my things went into the trash, and I walked away from my wife, my sons, and my life. Everything I had dreamed of was gone. I slept in my truck for about 2 weeks. I would stop in at LA Fitness to shower. When I left, my mind wasn't right. I didn't know whether I wanted to hurt myself or someone else. I didn't want to live anymore. Some nights I prayed to die. My boy Parrish came up on a studio during the same time that I was going through. It was a 5-bedroom house. Back in the Chai, we would call that a baby mansion. The house was damn near ready for MTV's Cribs. Being that I had no work and nowhere to stay, Parrish worked out a deal with the owner to allow me to stay at the studio house while I fixed it up. I was working day and night, painting, cutting grass, dumping trash, laying tile, and patching holes. I did whatever needed to be done. Parrish and I had plans to open up the studio to artists and record companies. I had already started to take on clients. There were even some producers and engineers that were getting involved, but the house was taking forever to complete. Late one night, I sat in that very house and contemplated suicide. The problem was, I was too scared to die and too smart to kill myself. Once again, I was feeling sorry for myself. My life had been a series of highs and lows, and I couldn't imagine my future. The Spirit of God came to me that night saying, "Look around. What do you mean you don't have anything? It was a revelation for me. I had been complaining about my circumstances, not realizing that despite all the things I had been through, God had always kept me. Chapter 34, Dearly Departed. While things were falling apart in Atlanta, I got the news that my sister Linda had suffered a stroke. It took me a while to come up with the money to go back home, but I called to check on her every day. The stroke had messed up her speech, but she was eventually released from the hospital. Whenever I talked to her, she would cry because I couldn't understand what she was saying. She had been so used to saying whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. It was a harsh reality, and it reminded me of how my mother suffered. I never really realized how sick my sister Linda was. Before long, she suffered another stroke. This time, her brain swelled and she had blood clots. It was devastating. While Linda was in the hospital fighting for her life, Kimberla's father, my Uncle Junior, was in hospice, preparing to make his transition. Kimberla and I made the drive to Chicago to see her father. While I was driving, Kim fell asleep. We were about 2 hours away from Chicago when my phone rang. It was my Aunt Joanne. Kimberla's father had died. She told me not to say anything to Kimberla, so I didn't. It was one of the hardest rides of my life. I knew how close Kimberla and her dad were. I just wished we had made it there in time enough for her to say goodbye. While arrangements were being made for Uncle Junior, I went to the rehabilitation center to see Linda. It messed me up to see her laying in the bed with tubes down her throat. She didn't even know I was there. I grabbed her hand, but she could not grip my hand at all. There was a sense of emptiness, but I was still hoping and praying that she would pull through. After the funeral, I went back home to Atlanta. I wasn't there a month before Linda passed away. No matter how many people I lost, I could never get used to death. It always knocked the wind out of me. Losing my sister broke my heart. When I went back to Chicago, I went alone. It hurt my heart to travel alone. I couldn't believe that Edrie wasn't with me. At the service, everyone was asking, "Where is your wife?" I had experienced death in so many ways. I had lost so many people that were close to me. If I ever needed someone by my side, it was then. I felt like I was in a lonely battle. True enough, I had family and friends, but I needed my wife. I needed her shoulder to cry on. I wanted to lie on the pillow and talk to her until we fell asleep. Linda's death hit our family hard. It was unbelievable to us that she was gone. Her death brought the family closer together. I always made sure that I talked to my sister, Orlean, on most Sundays. We made sure that we called each other on holidays and on Mama's birthday. We always called each other on our birthdays as well. We'd been doing that since our mom passed. My sister Renee would always call me. If I didn't answer, she would leave a message on my phone telling me that she loved me. Renee had lived in Detroit since I was a little boy. She would send for my mom and me every Thanksgiving. We would always take Greyhound. It was something that my mom and I looked forward to. Every now and then, I would be on the road with a fellow by the name of Norman Connors. The gigs didn't pay much, but I was staying in 5-star hotels. I was singing, and I had a roof over my head. It was a step up from sleeping in my truck. The pay was so low that sometimes I spent more getting to the shows and eating than I made from the performance. Sometimes I had nothing at all. Norman always came up with an excuse. It was like I was doing shows for a crackhead promoter. But he wasn't on crack. He was just a bad businessman. After a while, I refused to take calls from him until he got his shit together. Whenever I was doing badly, my sister Peaches would help. I would only call her when I had exhausted all of my other options. One time, I was on the side of the road, about to run out of gas. My sister loaded money on a green dot card, and I was able to get food and gas. Renee called me one Saturday to invite me to her birthday party. During this time, my car wasn't working. Before I was able to get the car out of the shop, I got a call from my sister Orlean telling me that Renee had suffered a massive stroke. She was in intensive care. Not again. I couldn't believe it was happening again. It would be a week before I'd be able to drive up to Detroit. Before I could leave Atlanta, Renee suffered another stroke and had to have emergency brain surgery. Seeing her brought back so many memories of my mother. It didn't help that her hospital wristband read Dorothy R. Stewart. We called her Renee, but that was her middle name. She had actually been named after our mother. It was hard to take. Renee's head was visibly swollen when I saw her. By the next day, it was nearly 3 times that size. She was going through the same thing my sister Linda had. The day after, I went to the hospital, but before I entered the room, I was warned about what I would see. Renee was in this special bed that was supposed to help remove the fluid from her lungs. It looked like a huge casket. She was strapped to the bed, lying on her side, in mid-air. Her condition was grave, and it was hard to watch her suffer like that. The family needed to come together and make some decisions because the doctors had done all they could do. On October 2nd, my son DJ's birthday, we all arrived at the hospital and watched as she took her very last breath. Every time I thought about her, I would see a vision of that machine counting down. I just could not believe this shit. I had faith in God, but this